The ballroom shimmered beneath 1,000 golden lights. Crystal chandeliers cast ripples of brilliance across silk gowns, polished shoes, and gloved hands clutching champagne flutes. The music from the string quartet floated gently through the air, graceful and proud, the kind of melody that belonged to people who had never known dust or hunger. At the far edge of the room, near the buffet table, Naomi stood quietly, holding a silver tray. Her uniform was immaculate, though slightly faded at the seams. Her eyes moved across the room, calm but alert, the eyes of someone used to being invisible in luxury. At the center of the dance floor stood Mrs. Aldridge, tall, elegant, her diamonds catching the light like tiny suns. Her son, Daniel, stood beside her, polite, reserved, a little lost among all the wealth. The conversation circled around them like perfume, and laughter burst now and then, brittle and sharp. One of the guests, a man too confident and too bored, glanced toward Naomi and smirked. "Mrs. Aldridge," he said with a grin, "perhaps your maid would like a turn on the floor. Maybe she'll show us some real rhythm." The crowd chuckled. Even Daniel looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Aldridge turned her head slightly, a cool smile touching her lips. "Oh, my dear," she replied, her voice sweet as poison. "If she can dance this waltz properly, she can marry my son." The laughter grew louder, echoing under the chandeliers. Naomi froze for a moment, the tray trembling slightly in her hands. Her gaze flicked to Daniel, his cheeks flushed, eyes downcast, embarrassed but silent. Then, slowly, she set the tray on the table beside her. The sound of silver against glass made a delicate clink that silenced a few nearby conversations. Naomi straightened her back, her posture no longer that of a servant. "I accept," she said quietly, her voice calm, but carrying across the room like a clear note of defiance. The crowd hushed. Someone's glass paused mid-air. Mrs. Aldridge blinked, the amusement fading from her face. Naomi stepped toward the center of the ballroom, where the polished floor gleamed beneath her feet. For the first time that night, the laughter stopped, replaced by something else entirely, curiosity. Would you like me to continue and expand scene 2, the waltz itself, in the same vivid, cinematic tone? The string quartet hesitated for only a moment before the conductor lifted his bow again. The soft, deliberate rhythm of a waltz filled the air, elegant, slow, and rich with unspoken challenge. Naomi stood alone at the center of the floor. The lights from the chandelier spilled over her shoulders, making her uniform shimmer faintly. For a few seconds, no one moved. Dozens of eyes watched her, waiting, some amused, others skeptical. Then she took a single step forward. One step became two. Her movements were effortless, poised, like the music had found a body it was meant for. The audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't the uncertain shuffle they had expected from a maid. This was grace, precision, mastery. The hem of her skirt swayed in perfect rhythm as she turned, her bare feet whispering across the marble. Her posture was flawless, her breathing steady. It wasn't just a dance, it was a reclaiming. Each motion spoke of control, of pride long hidden under silence and servitude. Daniel, still standing by the wall, couldn't take his eyes off her. Something inside him stirred, recognition, awe, maybe even shame. When Naomi extended her hand, inviting him wordlessly, he didn't hesitate. Gasps fluttered through the room. The air of one of the city's wealthiest families crossing the floor to dance with the maid, scandalous. But Daniel didn't care. The moment his hand touched hers, the world shrank to the rhythm between them. They began to waltz. It was seamless, like two halves of the same melody. He followed her lead without realizing it, her timing impeccable, her turns elegant and confident. The laughter that once filled the ballroom dissolved into silence. Only the violins remained, their song wrapping around the couple like a spell. As they spun, Naomi's face softened. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. Every movement declared what words never could. She belonged there. The woman who once swept the floor was now commanding the center of it, and no one dared to interrupt. When the final note trembled into silence, Daniel still held her hand. The air seemed to pause with them, heavy with awe and disbelief. Then, slowly, applause began, hesitant at first, then thunderous. And Mrs. Aldridge, pale and speechless, realized that her joke had turned into prophecy. Dash dash dash. Would you like me to expand scene 3 next? The aftermath and revelation, with the same cinematic intensity and emotional closure. For a long moment, the applause refused to die down. It swelled and broke over the ballroom like a wave, filling every corner where, moments ago, only laughter and cruelty had lived. Naomi stood still, breathing hard, the rise and fall of her chest the only movement amid the storm of clapping hands. Daniel still held her hand, his eyes bright, almost disbelieving. He turned to face his mother, who sat frozen in her chair, lips parted, complexion drained of color. The proud Mrs. Aldridge, who so easily commanded the room, now looked small beneath the weight of her own arrogance. When the music faded completely, Naomi bowed slightly, her grace unbroken. "Thank you," she said softly, voice trembling only from emotion, not fear. Mrs. Aldridge found her words at last. "Where did you learn to dance like that?" she demanded, her tone half whisper, half accusation. Naomi straightened, eyes meeting hers without flinching. "At the National Academy," she said simply. "Before I worked here." A murmur rippled through the guests. The National Academy, the country's most prestigious school for the arts. It was a name spoken with reverence, not one expected from a servant's lips. "I was a national champion," Naomi continued quietly, "until an injury ended my career. My family needed me, and life changed." She smiled faintly, not with pride, but with peace. "Cleaning your floors never made me less of who I was. It just reminded me how easily people forget what worth really means." Mrs. Aldridge lowered her gaze, unable to meet Naomi's. The air felt heavy, charged with shame and awe. Then Daniel stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "Mother," he said gently but firmly, "you made a promise." The crowd stirred again, remembering her cruel joke. "If she can dance this waltz, she can marry my son." What had been meant as mockery now hung in the air like divine irony. Mrs. Aldridge looked from her son to Naomi, as if searching for escape, but there was none. Naomi didn't gloat, she only stood there, strong, calm, radiant. Daniel turned fully toward her, his expression open, earnest. "If you'll still have me," he said softly, "then let's make her words mean something better." For the first time, Naomi let herself smile, a real smile, warm and full of light. "I didn't dance for your mother's promise," she whispered. "I danced to remember who I was. But, maybe now, I can start to remember who I might become." He squeezed her hand. Around them, the crowd began to applaud again, not for spectacle this time, but for truth. And as the chandelier lights shimmered above, Naomi stood in the center of that glittering room, no longer a maid, no longer a shadow, but a woman who had reclaimed her place in the story. Dash dash dash. Would you like me to give this story a title, description, and hashtags, keywords like I did for the previous one, optimized for YouTube or short film release?